Hey, this is Mike here. Today, I wanted to show you what I did for these cocking arms. Somebody asked me about it, so I'm going to do a little quick video of this. Not going to be much of a show and tell, but I'll do more of an explanation. Um, because not everybody's going to be able to pull this off. It depends what you have available. If you even have a shop vise, a good one. Let's see. At any rate, you have your cocking arm in there with that pin, and it's flared. Let me turn this light on. This one's been replaced already. I had a nice show and tell, but unfortunately the film didn't come out right, so I'm going to have one like this. Anyway, you have the normal pin that's inside of the block, and that sits right here. This won't go in unless I force it in, but once both sides are flared, it looks like it's stamped in with a machine. You know how they do it at manufacturer, and the ends are slightly flared. There's a couple different things you could do, but the easiest thing to do for me is I go out to Ace Hardware and I'll go out and get these tension pins, and they look like this. They got the slits, and when they get put into the hole, they'll slightly close up to fit that hole just right. But the ends are going to have to be flared because that is not, the tension that these have from being squeezed in the hole is not enough to keep them in position. But these screws are, these pins are they're very hard. It's not a soft steel. At any rate, so what you want to do here to get this pin out, what I do is I'll get a drill bit to just below the size of that pin, and I will stick it right on top and then drill it just a little bit like that. So it looks like that. And it leaves a little bit of thin metal on one side, or however, it could be all around, but this particular one, it was just on the one side there. It could have crumbled too when I took it off. So I'll drill it down through the pin into that, about that much, right? And then what that does is you'll be able to stick your punch pin on top there and punch the rest of the pin out of the block. So then once you get this out, you're going to need to take your caliper and measure it and see what it measures. So here it looks like that, and it says 4.02 millimeters. If you turn a little bit, do it again. It's every time you're going to get a different reading. One time I actually got a 4 millimeters. It's just the way these calipers are, and the way you squeeze and what point you're on. But basically that would be 4 millimeters. Okay. So Ace Hardware has the 4 millimeters, and they got the different lengths. And I got this here at 4 millimeters and 5/32, which I believe is pretty much the same, but close enough. At any rate, like I said, the pins do come open, and then they'll squeeze back down to, whatever your hole size is on the block. So what you do is you want to get that. Let's use the block here. You want to get the pin just a little longer than the block. Now I know that the pin actually rests right inside there. So you're thinking, well, geez, why don't you just make it the same length of the block? Well, the way I do it, I need it longer. So that's why I say make it a little longer than the block, not much longer, but just a little bit, so you have a little bit on both sides sticking out past the block. And that way, when you're vicing something up, you won't have any of this touching the vice block. Okay? It'll be right on top of the edge of the pin. So the pins are also tapered on the edges. Just stick your cock and arm into your block, and just double check to make sure that your arm is in there and it is going the right way, right? Because you don't want to go through all this nonsense and put it in like that and come back and find, geez, the cock and arm's up backwards. So take your time, lube this up like that, both sides. Stick it in there and center it up. Work it till it's centered, and then lay it down on your table and drive your pin in. Now, if your pin's too long, you're going to have to cut it. So Ace Hardware has these in a bag. You can get them. They have them there. I forget. There's 6 pieces in this bag, and you can cut it. And if I'm going to cut something like that, I'm going to wind up using the Dremel cut-off wheel, and then I'll clean it up with the Dremel drum sander and put a bevel on it. At any rate, at that point, what I do for me is I just have a thing that I made that I beveled, and I don't remember. I've had it for a while. You can take a piece of steel if you have a bench grinder and try to grind yourself a taper, right? So grind yourself something, a taper, that so you can stick this in to the ends of the pin and then squeeze up on your vise, and then your pin will start to flare out. And like I said before, these pins, these tension pins are very hard steel. It's not going to be easy to do that. So what I do is, once I get this here, I get this viced up. I got the metal between both sides of sticking out on the block, and I'll stick this in there like that, right? I'll get it all set up, and I'll drop it down just like this into my bench vise. And the pin is still sticking on the other side a little bit, so I'm not up against anything. Or I could also use I have blocks for my bench, and they look like that. But the pin would just actually wind up butchering this up, so that's why I have the pin sticking out on both sides. And then normally what happens, this will give in and start to flare. And once it flares and presses around, it's not perfect yet, I'll flip this and then do the other side. And here's what mine look like. I don't know if you can see them or not. So they're not perfect. And then once I get it to a certain point, then I get the ball bearing out. I've tried ball bearings with these before, and they just mar up. They just do not want to squeeze this from the beginning to the get-go, and that's why I make a tool like that. So you can just buy some steel stock and grind and make yourself a nice bevel, whatever it takes to have a tapered sweep bevel. Anyway, then I'll take a BB. One of my BBs anyway. Probably my guess is the 1/4 inch or 5/16, like that. And then I'll just get some electrical tape, just like this. And tape the BB in place. And then do the other side the same way. And then I'll just take it, the whole thing like that, and walk it over to my big vise. And I'll set it up in there, making note that I don't go into where one of the screw holes are. So you can see your screw hole, so you need to stay away from that. And I'll just slip this down in there carefully, and then turn it and put the tension on that, and then I'll have to put a persuader on that and then give it another good squeeze with a good persuader bar. And if you have a cheap, see now that's a heavy duty one. It's still Chinese and it's still junky, but it does what we need it to do. But if you do it on something like this, you got to be very careful, because these can break. And there's one down there on the floor, just to let you know, that's broke, because they can break. It's crappy cast iron. It's probably from the scrap yard. It's God knows what they make that stuff out of, but it's recycled cast iron, and it's ugly. And anyway, when I'm all done, that's what I'll get. Then I'll take my ball bearing out of there. The main thing is when you're done, is you rub your fingers on that, and nothing's grabbing, nothing's going to hurt you. It's safe, right? Your arm's fine. And then when I put the pin in, now you know when this gun is together and you go to break this barrel back. When you break the barrel back, there's that tension that's pushing back at that point, like that. So I keep that slit that's on the tension pin out of that area. That's just the way I look at it and view the subject. I'll keep that slit out of there. Now most likely that's going to be closed up by the time you get in there, and it'll squeeze back to 4 millimeters at the size of your hole. But I'll keep that slit out of the way, so when you go to break this down like that, the slit is not facing the actual bearing surface. And I think that basically the reason I do that is because that's the area you want it to be smooth. You don't want no little something going on there. So it's just a thought, and that's what I do. And you can get bearings also, ball bearings. They come, Ace Hardware has them in the pull-out drawers, and they have them. But I keep them, and I have them, and I have the tension pins as well. And then these, once I'm done, I'll just leave as a reminder in case I need to know what size. If I'm going to work on something, I got a pin. Basically, I've been lately, most of the time I've been on these hats and projects of mine, and I'm doing one right now, so I'm ready to work the trigger right now. So there, I figured I did a little show and tell, and I think you can safely and easily see the results, and also get the idea of what I said, so you can do yours as well. And everybody's got something different, but I don't know. I'm thinking here, if you use a regular steel, just say you had some steel stock, and it was 4 millimeters. Now I'm just saying this because who knows? You could probably just take, and because you don't have a press, and by the way, I do have a press, but I'm not running out to my shop outside in the lathe room just to work on my press and have to set something up for that. So I was able to make do down here. But you could take and drill the end of a pin, a solid pin, if it's 4 millimeters, right? And you can drill the end a little bit hollow, and that way what's left over can be flared. That's kind of what they did at the factory. So rather than me going and doing all that, I just went to Ace Hardware and got these tension pins. And like I said, this will be the third time, they're very, very, very hard steel. And you're not going to flare them easy. So that's my little tip for you. I hope that gives you the idea and understanding of what we just talked about. And so as far as cutting them, I did tell you that I'll take the Dremel cutoff tool. See if I have one up here handy. No, but they're in these little discs. I'll take one of those little Dremel cutoff tools, cut the pin, and then I'll use one of my fine sanders to clean it up, and then bevel the edges. Okay. And sometimes if you're going to cut something, what you want to do normally is don't cut it exact. but cut the excess off, leave a little bit more than you want it, and then work your way back a little bit while you're cleaning it up and then beveling it. And that way you'll be exactly where you want it, rather than trying to cut an exact piece is what I'm trying to tell you. Usually that won't work. So there, that's it. So this here is a project that I'm working on right now currently. It is finally putting this receiver together. And I don't recommend this for anybody to ever powder coat the receiver. Number one, they never, no matter how you explain it, and they all give you the yes. I had to clean up the forks. That was a pain. The bar got coated with the powder coating. I had to take that off, and that was it's just, they don't listen to the directions, and they're bound to mess up at least half of it. And in this particular one, they actually messed it up here at the scope rail, right? And at that point, that's why I was pretty sour and upset to only realize that my scope rail actually came in with a missing slot. This slot here I cut in. If anybody saw that film, that they were horrified because they saw me cutting this with a grinder by hand. Well, look, you know what? It did the job. We're not looking for machine perfect. If I was looking for machine perfect, I would have done it a different way. At this point, I wasn't. So whoever wants to raise a little bit of a red flag over that, knock yourself out. I certainly am not. So anyway, that's that. I'm finally getting this gun together. And it should be pretty cool. Just another project for me. And I'll do a little video for that, I guess, when that comes around. So this is Mike saying be safe and take care.